what's the problem, right? You have nothing to fear. I'm sure you've heard that before. I would like you to categorically reject that anytime you hear that, because what that is predicated on is that the government, the state, has a right to all of your information, and that they can peer into your lives whenever they wish, because after all, if you have nothing to hide, right? Wrong. That's not what freedom is about. Freedom is about doing what you want to do on your terms, sharing information with who you choose to share information with. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, the government has no right to access any of your information. There are some things that you're required by law to give to the government. Of course, we have to file our income taxes and things of that nature. But beyond that, the whole point of living in a free and democratic society is you go about your business. It's your business. You do what you want to do. And that's at the heart of privacy and its relationship to freedom. You cannot have freedom without a basis of privacy. What privacy is actually about is control. You being in control of the uses of your personal information. Privacy is all about personal control and freedom of choice. You get to decide what you want to do with your information. The Germans have a wonderful term for this. It's called Informational Self-Determination. Big term, simple concept, that it should be the individual who determines the fate of his or her personal information. And this was considered to be such an important value in Germany that in 1983 they enshrined it in their constitution, because it was absolutely critical to the Germans that privacy is paramount. And it's no accident that Germany is the leading privacy and data protection country in the world. It's no accident that they had to endure the abuses of the Third Reich and the complete cessation of all of their freedoms, starting with the removal of their privacy. One of the reasons personal control is so important for privacy is that privacy is highly contextual. What may be important to you won't be important to someone else. Someone would be happy to share certain information, whereas to you, it will be considered extremely sensitive and you would like to have it remain confidential. You can't have context without the individual involved in the decision making. Okay, so what's the problem? People often ask me this. There are a number of problems, and fortunately, the problems have been clarified over the past 2 years through the revelations of Edward Snowden. Mr. Snowden's revelations with respect to the massive state of surveillance on the part of the governments of the Five Eyes and all around the world have actually made my job much easier in explaining this. But I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I'm going to talk to you about zero sum. What's zero sum? Why am I talking about that? Why would I consider that to be the main problem? Let me tell you why. Zero sum simply means, it comes from game theory. When I was in graduate school, game theory was really big and everybody was studying it. I did my graduate work at U of T and I'll never forget. It was very exciting times. But zero sum simply means that you cannot have two positive increments in two areas at the same time. If you have an increase in security, it must be matched by a decrease in privacy, in the opposing, what is considered to be the opposing value, such that the two total to a sum of zero. That's all zero sum means. But it is inherently a win-lose proposition. You can't have win-win in zero sum. One wins, one loses, it totals to a sum of zero, plus 5 minus 5, 0. That's the problem, because I can assure you, I've been doing this for a long time, anytime privacy has to be versus some other interest like security or public safety, it's never privacy that wins, nor should it be. I'm not suggesting for a moment you abandon thoughts of security and public safety. We all want to be safe. We all need security. That's not the issue. I want you to reject zero sum. Because if we get rid of the versus, we get rid of the win-lose proposition, and we can substitute an alternative, a positive sum. And you don't even have to remember the term positive sum, remember win-win. Because you can have 2 positive increments in 2 areas at the same time. Is it harder to do? Absolutely. You need to be creative, you need to innovate, but we can do this. And in my former capacity as Privacy Commissioner, I partnered with all of the leaders in the tech world: Microsoft, IBM, Intel, HP, Oracle, and many others. We partnered together to show that you could have win-win propositions. And it's absolutely critical that zero-sum is so deeply entrenched in our society that I need all of your help to spread the word that we can get rid of this model. Let me tell you a little bit about privacy by design. Privacy by design is predicated on positive sum, not zero sum. It gets rid of the false dichotomies of win-lose propositions, and it substitutes a win-win. And as I said, it is harder to do, but it is eminently doable. In 2010, we have a conference every year of privacy commissioners, and in 2010 it happened to be in Jerusalem. And we put forward declarations that are voted upon. And privacy by design was unanimously passed as an international standard to form a framework for privacy around the world to complement regulatory compliance. Because while we have privacy laws of varying degrees in various jurisdictions, they're reactive, they're after the fact. The privacy harm arises and you respond to it by offering some system of redress. I had order-making power as a commissioner, and so you have a lot of influence. But the problem is, and that's why my colleagues and I passed this unanimously, with this growth of ubiquitous computing, massive online social media, connected devices everywhere, big data, the Internet of Things, wireless and wearable devices, we simply can't address all the harms that are arising. I compared it to an iceberg. If we see the tip of the iceberg as commissioners, we were lucky in terms of offering some system of redress. The majority of the harms were going by us beyond our knowledge, largely remaining unknown, unchallenged, unregulated. Privacy by design is all about being proactive. Think of a medical preventative model. We want to prevent the privacy harms from arising by embedding the necessary privacy measures into information technologies, into business practices, networked infrastructure, you name it, we can do this. And we have showed repeatedly the different ways that this could be done. And to my delight, it has been translated now into 37 languages. It has a real global presence. It's followed all around the world. And I'm just so pleased to see the growth of this, because we have to address privacy. If we don't do it now, we're going to lose it. You think of big data. Think of the Internet of Things. How are you ever going to get the genie back in the bottle with IoT when it's out there? Everything is connected and there's no privacy. We can't tolerate that. Remember, privacy forms the basis of our freedoms. Without one, you cannot have the other, and surely freedom is too strong a value for us to consider parting with. Let me tell you a story, ladies and gentlemen. I don't normally get personal, but I was asked to share this story with you, and I ask for your indulgence. Why is freedom so important to me? Because it is my life. This is why I do this work. I'm Armenian. I was 4 years old when we came to Canada. I was born in Cairo. And some of you may have noticed about a month ago, it was the 100-year anniversary of the Armenian genocide. I'm going to tell you about that. First, I'm going to tell you about my parents and my grandparents. My parents had a charmed life in Cairo. Up until the mid-50s, it was under British rule. And my mom used to tell me that Cairo was like the Paris of the Middle East, where everybody lived in harmony. The Christians, we had a wonderful church there. We lived in harmony with the Jews, with the Arabs, with the Egyptians. Everyone had a wonderful harmonious life. There were no problems. And my mother loved being a mother. I have 2 older brothers, and they had just a charmed life. Until mid-late 50s, when the British pulled out and Abdel Nasser came into rule. Everything changed, literally, overnight, my mother said. The banks were nationalized, there was no freedom. Where were you going? There was no privacy, there was nothing. My parents literally left in the dead of the night. They were not allowed to take any of the funds out of the country. They left, as my mother said, with 3 children, 8 suitcases, and 2 mothers, her mother and mother-in-law. And we came to Canada. And years later, I said to Mom, because I didn't realize at 4 years old what they were giving up, I said, how could you give up all of that? They were very affluent there. They had a wonderful life. How could you give all that up and start with nothing? We stayed in a friend's basement for 6 months until my parents could find a place to rent and had enough funds to get going. And when I asked my mother that question, how could you give up all that? She said, are you kidding? She gave me this blank face. She said, for you, for your brothers, for freedom. You have to be raised in freedom. You would have no freedom there. It was just unthinkable to her. And she reminded me of the earlier stories of my grandparents. I was raised by my two grandmothers because my parents were working all the time. And I remember having many conversations with my grandparents, my grandmothers, who had their identification numbers in the death camps that they were scheduled to be killed on. They had the numbers were tattooed in their forearms. And I remember having many conversations with them about this. On my father's side, my grandparents were scheduled to be killed the next day, as well as my father, who at the time would have been 3, and his 2 siblings. My grandfather was trying to think, how can I save my family? As you might imagine, he was an artist. So in the dead of the night, the only thing he could think to do, he had some charcoal with him and parchment. My grandmother's telling me this story. She said, I held a candle, and with candlelight, he etched from memory a portrait of the general who he had seen earlier in the day, Gemal Pasha. And in the hopes that, maybe he'd like the picture and something would happen. I mean, what else can you do? So he did this all night, and in the morning he wrapped it up and he gave it to one of the soldiers who were taking he and his wife and family to be killed, literally, that day. And gave it to the soldier and said, could you kindly give this to the general? And the soldier said, stupid man, what is the general going to want with this? So my grandfather thought that was it, and they were going off. And just before they were going to be killed, on horseback comes riding in this soldier, and he's waving around a decree, this paper. And the paper, and he said, where is Johannes Cavoukian? Where is he? And my grandfather puts his hand up. He said, this is a decree from the general. He is freeing you and your family. You can take up to 20 people out of the camp with you. You're free to go. So he took, obviously, his immediate family and many others who said, I'm a distant cousin, I'm a second cousin. He took 22 people out, and they were freed. And he had as you might imagine, a religious conversion. So they went to Jerusalem. They made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. In the old quarter of Jerusalem, one of the quarters is the Armenian quarter. And they went to the cathedral there. And my grandfather told this story to the bishop and said, I want to give my thanks to God. What can I do to help? And the bishop said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a painter. I'm an artist. And he said, well, you see these falling apart frescoes? If you can do anything to restore them, that would be great. So my grandfather thought, okay, this is a challenge. I can do this. They stayed there for 2 years, and he restored all the frescoes. And it was amazing. I had the honor of speaking at a conference in Jerusalem a number of years ago, and I got to visit the cathedral where my grandparents were, and where my grandfather restored all the frescoes. I mean, it was just the most moving experience. All of this to tell you why, to my family, freedom, you give up everything for freedom. Everything, economic value, everything. Nothing is more important than your freedom. And so, for me, the way I actualize that is by fighting for privacy. You may think that you're not going to have any privacy in the future, because people are telling you, oh my God, the NSA, the CSE, everybody has access to your information, everything is out of control, give it up. Big data's here, data analytics going to wipe out any notions of privacy as we know it, give it up. Do not give it up. I can show you time after time, example after example. I've worked with more engineers and computer scientists who are brilliant, who've all told me this is eminently doable. We can embed privacy into all of the new and emerging technologies that are coming out. We have to do it from the front end, by design. We have to think it through. We have to be smart, and fortunately they are so smart and innovative and creative. And my job is to get the attention of the CEOs and senior executives to make sure that when the instructions to write the code that go to these guys, that privacy is embedded into that process. It's as simple and as difficult as raising the bar, bringing it to the attention of people, and that's why I'm asking for your help. I want you to help me with this messaging. Get it across. Next time someone says to you, privacy is a thing of the past, give it up. You can only have privacy or freedom. You can have one or the other, privacy or security. Got to give up privacy. Say no. Say no, because we can have both. We must have both. And if we work together, we can make this dream a reality. And that's what we have to do for ourselves, for our children, and future generations. I look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.